People ask me how to fix their retirement at 55. They want a miracle. I tell them, you have 10 years. The arithmetic is simple. Save 40% of everything you earn and invest it in boring assets that compound. That is the plan. They look at me like I'm senile. They say, that's impossible. I say, then you cannot retire. Arithmetic doesn't care about your feelings. Most people think retirement is about finding better investments or timing the market. That is nonsense. Retirement is about the gap between what you earn and what you spend, multiplied by time. At 55, you are short on time. The gap must be enormous. You need extreme discipline for 10 years so you can live with dignity for 30 years after. Hit the like button if you're ready to hear the truth about catching up on retirement at 55. Before we get into this, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. City, state, country, just let me know. Here is why smart people fail at retirement catch-up. They think they can make up for lost time with better returns. That is backward. You make up for lost time by creating a massive gap between earnings and spending, then letting that gap compound in the safest investments you can find. You don't need exotic strategies. You need extreme discipline for a compressed period. I'll show you the 5 simple rules that give you a chance at retirement when you're starting at 55. Rules anyone can follow, but most won't. The first rule is the hardest because it requires you to live a life that looks like failure to everyone around you. Rule number 1, the emergency gap. Live on 60% or you don't retire. At 55 with minimal retirement savings, you must save 40% of your gross income for 10 years. Not 10%, not 15%, 40% minimum. This sounds impossible. It is not impossible. It is uncomfortable. Most people will not do it because they care more about what their neighbors think than about their future selves starving at 75. The problem is, people look at their current spending and say, I cannot cut 40%. That is backward. You don't start with current spending and try to cut. You start with 60% of your gross income and build a life inside that constraint. Everything else adjusts or disappears. At 55, you have 10 to 12 working years. The math doesn't work with normal savings rates. If you save 10% of a $100,000 salary for 10 years at 8% returns, you have $156,000. That generates $6,240 annually at 4% withdrawal. Add Social Security of $25,000. You're at $31,000 annual income. You're eating cat food. But if you save 40% of that $100,000 for 10 years at 8%, you have $624,000. That generates $24,960 annually. Add Social Security. You're at $50,000. You can live with dignity. Same salary, same returns, different gap. Richard Paulson was a vascular surgeon in Los Angeles. Started at 29, earned $450,000 to $600,000 annually for 26 years. At 55, he had $180,000 in retirement savings. His mortgage was $8,500 monthly. Car leases, $2,150 monthly. Private school, $6,000 monthly. Country club, $2,400 monthly. Total burn rate, $24,000 monthly. Take home, $26,000 monthly. He saved $2,000 monthly sometimes. At 55, he got arthritis in his hands. Could not operate. Partnership bought him out for $380,000. He used $200,000 to pay debt. 3 months later, sold the house at a loss. A year later, working as hospital administrator, earning $110,000. 2 years later, pulling from retirement early. 5 years later, retirement account gone. At 70, Richard works at a medical software company earning $75,000. He will work until he dies. He earned $13 million over 26 years, saved $180,000, 1.4% savings rate. If he had saved 20%, $100,000 annually for 26 years at 8%, he would have had $6.8 million at 55. But he chose to look rich instead of being rich. Janet Kowalski worked back office at a pharmaceutical company in New Jersey. She earned $62,000 annually. At 55, she had $48,000 in her 401k. She did the math and realized she could not retire. So she made a plan. She moved to a smaller apartment, $1,100 instead of $1,600. Sold her car, took the train, brown bag tuna sandwiches for 10 years. She looked poor, she was poor, but she was building something. She saved $24,000 annually, 38% of her gross income, put it all in a target date fund, worked until 67. At 67, she had $518,000. Social Security, $23,000 annually. 401k, $20,720 annually. Total income, $43,720. Expenses, $36,000. She had a surplus. Janet is 74 now, lives in a small apartment, takes the bus, does not travel to Europe, but she does not worry about money. Richard earned 8 times what Janet earned and will die broke. Janet will die secure. At 55, retirement is about the gap. You need a 40% gap between what you earn and what you spend for 10 to 12 years. Every time you break discipline, a new car, a vacation, you steal from your 75-year-old self. Most people cannot live with that level of discipline because their identity is wrapped up in looking successful now. Rule number 2, the boring portfolio. Buy the index and do nothing. Put 100% of your retirement savings in a total stock market index fund and do nothing for 10 years. That is the entire strategy. No individual stocks, no real estate, no cryptocurrency, no bonds until you are 63. Just the index. People think they need to beat the market to catch up. That is nonsense. The market returns about 10% annually over long periods. That is enough. What kills people is interrupting compounding, trading, timing crashes, chasing hot stocks. Every time you do that, you destroy years of compounding. People think they are too old for 100% stocks. That is backward for someone starting at 55 with nothing. You are not close to retirement. You are close to the beginning of saving. You need growth. Bonds return 4 to 5%. That will not save you. You need stock returns. Kevin Morrison was a petroleum engineer in Houston. At 55, he had $85,000 in his 401k. He earned $140,000. He decided to invest aggressively to catch up. He opened a brokerage account and started buying individual stocks. Tesla at $180, sold at $240, made $15,000. Netflix lost $8,000. Nvidia made $3,000. Small biotech lost $12,000. After 2 years of 37 stock trades, his total gain was $4,200 on a $100,000 portfolio. That is 2.1% annually. The S&P 500 returned 18% and 21% those same years. Kevin underperformed by 35 percentage points trying to beat the market. If he had bought VTI and done nothing, his $85,000 would have grown to $125,000. Instead, he had $94,000 and wasted hundreds of hours. At 57, he put everything in a target date fund. At 65, he had $410,000. Not enough. He is working until 70. Those 2 years of cleverness cost him $80,000 in lost compounding. Thomas Chen was an accountant in San Francisco. He earned $95,000. At 55, had $62,000 in his 401k. His co-worker said, "Invest in rental properties." Thomas said, "No. I am 55. I do not have time to learn real estate. I need simple and certain." Thomas put everything in VTSAX, Vanguard Total Stock Market Index. Set contribution to 42% of salary, $1,700 every 2 weeks into the account automatically. Did not look at the account, did not check balances, did not read financial news, worked and saved for 10 years. At 65, Thomas had $687,000, lives on $27,480 from 401k plus $21,000 Social Security. Total, $48,480. Expenses, $42,000. He is fine. Thomas told me, "I wanted to do something clever, buy Bitcoin or trade options, but I knew I would lose. So I bought the index and sat on my ass for 10 years. The waiting was the hard part." Sit on your ass investing. Kevin acted. Thomas sat. Kevin underperformed. Thomas matched the market. Kevin works until 70. Thomas retired at 65. The difference was discipline. At 55, you cannot afford to be clever. You need to be boring and consistent. Rule number 3, the debt-death spiral. 0 debt or 0 retirement. At 55, you must eliminate all debt within 3 years. Not pay it down. Eliminate it. Every dollar you pay in interest is a dollar that cannot compound for retirement. Debt and retirement catch-up are mutually exclusive. The problem is, people think they can manage it. They think a 4% mortgage is fine because stocks return 10%. But the mortgage requires a monthly payment that reduces what you can save. That monthly payment is the killer. The invisible cost is the compounding you lose. Sandra Welch was a marketing director in Chicago. At 55, earned $110,000. Had $45,000 in retirement savings. Also had $280,000 mortgage at 4.5%, $48,000 car loan at 5.2%, and $18,000 credit card debt at 19%. Monthly payments, $1,640 mortgage, $680 car, $450 credit cards. Total, $2,770 monthly, 30% of gross income to debt service. She could not save 40% because 30% was locked into debt. She tried to save 15%. That would not be enough. At 56, Sandra got real. Sold her house, paid off mortgage, used equity to pay off car and credit cards. Moved to rental apartment for $1,400 monthly, bought a 2009 Toyota Corolla for $5,500 cash. People thought she was in financial trouble. She was. But now she was fixing it. Sandra saved $42,000 annually, 38% of salary, for 9 years. At 65, had $512,000. Social Security, $19,000. 401k, $20,480. Total, $39,480. Expenses, $35,000. She was fine. If Sandra kept the house and car and tried to save while making debt payments, she would have saved $14,000 annually. At 65, she would have $248,000. That is $9,920 annual income from 401k. Add Social Security, she is at $28,920. Expenses still $35,000. She would be $6,080 short every year. Run out of money at 73, destitute at 75. The debt payments, $2,770 monthly, look manageable, earning $110,000. But that is $33,240 annually. Invested at 8% for 10 years, that is $509,000. Sandra's debt was costing her $500,000 in lost retirement savings. Roger Bateman was a database administrator in Atlanta. At 55, earned $98,000, had $38,000 in 401k, had $165,000. Mortgage at 5%, $32,000 car loan at 6%, $12,000 credit cards at 22%. His financial advisor: keep the mortgage. Interest is tax deductible. Put savings in the market. You'll earn more than you're paying in interest. Roger followed the advice, tried to save 25% while making debt payments. Could not do it. Saved 12% for 3 years. Retirement grew to $75,000. At 58, company acquired. Roger lost his job, unemployed 7 months, used credit cards to cover expenses. Credit card debt went from $12,000 to $31,000. New job at $82,000. Pay cut, more debt, less income. Could not save anything. At 65, Roger had $118,000 in retirement. Social Security, $17,000. 401k, $4,720. Total, $21,720. Mortgage payment still $1,180 monthly, $14,160 annually. Car, $5,760 annually. Credit cards, $3,840 annually. Total debt service, $23,760 annually. Income, $21,720. He was $2,040 short before paying for food or utilities. Roger declared bankruptcy at 67. Lives in his daughter's basement. Will die there. His advisor earned $10,000 in fees over 10 years. Roger ended up bankrupt. The advisor drives a Tesla. Debt is not a tool. It is a trap. At 55, every dollar to debt is a dollar that does not compound. You cannot save your way out of debt. Sell the house. Sell the car. Feel poor for 3 years so you can eliminate debt, then feel secure for 30 years. Rule number 4, the side income. Earn extra or work forever. At 55, if you cannot save 40% of your primary income, you must earn additional income until you can. Not might, must. A side job, consulting, freelancing, anything that increases income so you can save enough. Most people will not do this because they think they deserve to relax at 55. You deserve what the arithmetic says you deserve. The problem is not that people do not know they could earn more. The problem is pride. People think side work is beneath them. A man who was a director at a corporation does not want to consult for $75 an hour. A woman who was a senior analyst does not want to tutor high school kids in math for $50 an hour. They would rather save nothing than do work they think is beneath their dignity. That pride costs them retirement. Here's the second problem. People think side income means starting a business or building passive income streams. That is backward. At 55, you do not have time to build a business that might pay off in 5 years. You need cash flow now. You need simple, immediate work that pays weekly or monthly. You do not need equity or growth or leverage. You need money that goes straight into the retirement account. The third problem is taxation. Side income is taxed as ordinary income on top of your primary income. People earn an extra $20,000 and think they made $20,000. They did not. They made $14,500 after taxes. That feels inefficient. But $14,500 invested annually for 10 years at 8% is $221,000. That is the difference between retiring and not retiring for many people. Inefficient beats nothing. Let me tell you about Walter Harris. Walter was a civil engineer for a county government. At 55, he earned $92,000 annually. He had $51,000 in his pension fund. He did the math. His pension would pay about $42,000 annually if he worked until 65. Add Social Security at $19,000, he would have $61,000 annual income in retirement. But his expenses were $68,000 annually. He would be $7,000 short every year. He needed more. Walter started consulting on the side. He reviewed site plans for small engineering firms that needed a licensed engineer to sign off on their work. He charged $125 an hour. He worked 10 hours a week, mostly on weekends. That was $1,250 weekly, $5,000 monthly, $60,000 annually before taxes. After taxes, he kept about $39,000. Walter put every penny of his side income into his 401k. He saved $39,000 annually from side work plus $9,000 from his primary job. 48% total savings rate. He did this for 10 years. At 65, Walter had $588,000 in his 401k plus his pension. His 401k generated $23,520 annually. His pension paid $42,000. His Social Security paid $19,000. Total income, $84,520. His expenses were $68,000. He had a surplus. Walter told me, "I hated working weekends. I wanted to play golf. But I wanted to retire more than I wanted to play golf on Saturday. So I worked." That is discipline, not fun, not exciting. Discipline. Here is the arithmetic. Walter earned $920,000 from his primary job over 10 years. He earned $600,000 from side work. That side work, after taxes, produced $390,000 of actual savings. Without it, Walter would have saved $90,000 over 10 years from his primary income. That would have grown to $154,000. He would have retired on $48,160 annually. He would have been $19,840 short every year. He would have run out of money by age 78. He would have been destitute at 80. The side work saved him, but it cost him 520 Saturdays. That is the trade. You give up 520 Saturdays to gain 5,000 days of secure retirement. Most people will not make that trade because 520 Saturdays feel real and 5,000 retirement days feel abstract. But the arithmetic does not care about feelings. Now let me tell you about Lydia Fernandez. Lydia was a human resources manager in Denver. At 55, she earned $87,000 annually. She had $29,000 in her 401k. She needed to save aggressively, but she could only save 25% of her salary after her fixed expenses. That would not be enough. Lydia started tutoring ESL students in the evenings. She charged $40 an hour. She worked 12 hours a week. That was $480 weekly, about $1,920 monthly, $23,040 annually before taxes. After taxes, she kept $15,800. She put every penny into her 401k. Lydia saved $21,750 from her primary job, plus $15,800 from tutoring. $37,550 total annually. That was 43% of her primary salary. She did this for 10 years. At 65, Lydia had $551,000 in her 401k. She claimed Social Security at 65, getting $18,200 annually. Her 401k generated $22,040 annually. Total income, $40,240. Her expenses were $38,000. She was fine. Without the tutoring income, Lydia would have saved $217,500 over 10 years from her primary job alone. That would have grown to $367,000. That generates $14,680 annually from the 401k. Add Social Security. She is at $32,880 annually. Her expenses are $38,000. She is $5,120 short every year. She runs out of money at 76. She becomes dependent on her children or the state. Lydia gave up 1,200 evenings over 10 years to secure her retirement. She told me, "I wanted to watch TV. I wanted to relax after work, but I wanted to be secure more than I wanted to be comfortable. So I tutored." That is the choice. Comfort now or security later. You cannot have both when you are starting at 55 with nothing saved. The principle is this. At 55, your primary job is probably maxed out. You are earning what you will earn. The only way to increase savings is to earn more outside your primary job. Side income is not optional when you are behind. It is mandatory. Every extra dollar you earn and save is a dollar that compounds into your retirement security. But most people will not earn extra income because they think they have already worked enough. That is backward. You have not worked enough until you have saved enough. The final rule is the hardest for modern people because it requires you to become invisible. Rule number 5, the invisibility principle. Disappear socially to appear financially. Here is the 5th rule. At 55, You must become socially invisible for 10 years. No big vacations, no new cars, no expensive hobbies, no dinners out, no country clubs, no events that require expensive clothes or gifts. You must vanish from the social scene entirely. Anyone who tells you that you can save 40% and still maintain your current social life is lying to you or does not understand arithmetic. The problem is not that people do not understand this rule. The problem is they think they can have it both ways. They think they can save aggressively and still take one nice vacation a year. They cannot. One nice vacation for a couple costs $5,000 minimum. That is $5,000 that cannot go to retirement. Invested at 8% for 10 years, that one vacation costs $10,800 in lost compounding. Take one nice vacation every year for 10 years, and you lose $108,000 in retirement savings. That is $4,320 in annual retirement income for 30 years. You traded 10 weeks of vacation for $130,000 in lifetime retirement income. That is the arithmetic. Here's the second problem. People think if they just cut out obvious luxuries, designer clothes, expensive cars, golf club memberships, they can save enough. That is not enough. You need to cut everything. You need to live like a graduate student, rice and beans, used furniture, no cable TV, no gym membership. You cook every meal. You drink water. You entertain yourself with the library and free parks. That sounds like poverty. It is not poverty. It is temporary discipline that buys permanent security. The third problem is family pressure. At 55, you probably have adult children or aging parents who expect things from you. Your daughter expects you to contribute to her wedding. Your son expects you to help with his house down payment. Your parents expect you to visit them across the country twice a year. You cannot do any of that. You have to say no. You have to tell them, I cannot afford that because I am 10 years from retirement with almost nothing saved. They will think you are selfish. You are not selfish. You are in crisis. Let me tell you about Frank and Carol Dietrich. Frank was a high school principal in Ohio. Carol was a library administrator. Combined, they earned $142,000 annually at age 55. They had $67,000 combined in retirement savings. They realized they were in trouble. They made a plan. They would save 45% of their gross income for 10 years. That was $63,900 annually. To do that, they had to cut everything. They moved from a house to a 2-bedroom apartment, saved $800 monthly. They sold both cars and bought 2 used Honda Civics for $7,000 each, eliminated $740 monthly in payments. They stopped eating at restaurants entirely, saved $600 monthly. They canceled cable, gym memberships, magazine subscriptions, saved $180 monthly. They stopped taking vacations, saved $4,000 annually. They told their kids they could not help with weddings or down payments, saved $15,000 over 5 years. Their friends thought they were going through a financial crisis. They were. But they were fixing it. For 10 years, Frank and Carol lived like they earned $40,000 instead of $142,000. They drove 15-year-old cars. They ate spaghetti and salad. They never went to the movies. They never bought new clothes unless something wore out. They became socially invisible. At 65, Frank and Carol had $887,000 in retirement savings. They claimed Social Security, getting $34,000 combined annually. Their 401k generated $35,480 annually. Total income, $69,480. Their expenses were $55,000 annually. They had a surplus. They were secure. Frank told me the hardest part was not the spending cuts. It was explaining to people why we were not at their parties, their weddings, their trips. They thought we were broke or antisocial. We were neither. We were invisible by choice, so we could be visible in retirement. Here is the arithmetic. If Frank and Carol had tried to maintain their social life and saved 20% instead of 45%, they would have saved $28,400 annually. At 65, they would have had $501,000 in retirement savings. That generates $20,040 from the 401k annually. Add Social Security of $34,000, they have $54,040 in retirement income. But their expenses in retirement, if they kept their normal lifestyle, would be $65,000 annually. They would be $10,960 short every year. They would run out of money at 73. They would be destitute at 75. By becoming invisible for 10 years, they saved an additional $355,000. That is $14,200 in annual retirement income for life. They traded 10 years of parties and vacations and new cars for 30 years of security. Most people will not make that trade because the parties are visible and the retirement security is abstract. Now, let me tell you about Dennis Cow. Dennis was a software project manager in Austin. At 55, he earned $125,000 annually. He had $82,000 in his 401k. He tried to save aggressively. He put 30% of his salary into retirement, $37,500 annually. But he also kept up appearances. He drove a leased BMW, $620 monthly. He took a trip to Europe every year, $6,000. He ate lunch out every day, $15 daily, $3,600 annually. He bought new golf clubs, $2,200. He went to concerts and sports events, $2,400 annually. He bought nice clothes for work, $1,800 annually. Dennis saved for retirement, but he also spent $24,000 annually on lifestyle items he thought he deserved. He thought he could do both. He could not. At 65, Dennis had $568,000 in retirement savings. That generates $22,720 annually. Add Social Security of $22,000, he has $44,720 in retirement income. But his expenses, including the car lease and travel and entertainment, were $62,000 annually. He was $17,280 short every year. Dennis could not maintain his lifestyle in retirement. He had to cut everything. He sold the BMW and bought a 2012 Honda. He stopped traveling. He stopped going to concerts. He stopped playing golf. At 66, he realized he could not afford the life he thought he was retiring into. He went back to work part-time as a consultant. He earns $35,000 annually now. He will work until his health fails. Dennis saved $375,000 over 10 years, but he spent $240,000 on lifestyle items during those same 10 years. If that $240,000 had been invested instead at 8%, it would have grown to $520,000. Dennis would have had $1,088,000 in retirement savings instead of $568,000. That is $43,520 in annual retirement income from the 401k. Add Social Security, he is at $65,520. He could have lived comfortably without working again. Instead, he is working in his late 60s because he could not become invisible for 10 years. Dennis told me, I thought I could save for retirement and still live a little. I was wrong. You cannot do both when you're starting at 55 with nothing. It is one or the other. I chose wrong. The principle is this. At 55, your social life is expensive. Every event, every trip, every restaurant meal, every gift, every round of golf, all of it costs money that should be compounding for retirement. You cannot afford your social life anymore. You have to disappear. You have to become the person who never shows up, who never travels, who drives the embarrassing car, who wears the same clothes for years. That feels like failure. It is not failure. It is emergency savings mode. You are invisible for 10 years so you can be visible and dignified for 30 years after that. I learned these principles from my grandfather, John Ingham. Let me tell you about him. Grandpa Ingham was a pattern maker at a factory in Omaha. He earned a modest wage his entire life. He retired at 65 with enough money to live comfortably until he died at 92. He never earned more than $45,000 in today's dollars, but he died with $780,000 in savings. Here is how he did it. He saved 30% of his income every year from age 25 to 65. He lived in a small house. He drove the same car for 18 years. He never ate at restaurants. He never took vacations. He never bought anything new if he could buy it used. People thought he was cheap. He was not cheap. He was disciplined. Grandpa Ingham told me when I was 30, Charlie, the secret to wealth is the gap between what you earn and what you spend. Create the gap, invest the difference, and do not touch it for 40 years. That is the entire formula. Simple, but not easy. Most people fail not because they do not understand this, but because they cannot live with the gap. They spend to impress people they do not like. They buy things they do not need. They work for 40 years and have nothing at the end. Do not be like them. I asked him, Grandpa, did you ever regret not spending more, not taking trips or buying nice things? He said, I regret nothing. I had security. I never worried about money. I never had to ask anyone for help. I lived with dignity until I died. That is worth more than 1,000 trips to Europe. My mother remembered this story because Grandpa Ingham told it over and over. He wanted us to understand that wealth is not about income. It is about discipline. You can earn millions and die broke. You can earn modest wages and die secure. The difference is the gap in time. Let me make this simple. Here are the rules. Rule 1, the emergency gap. Save 40% of your gross income for 10 years. Not 10%, not 20%, 40%. That is physics. You cannot retire on less when you start at 55 with nothing. Rule 2, the boring portfolio. Put 100% in a total stock market index fund and do nothing. The snowball gets big if you let it roll. Trading and cleverness kill compounding. Rule 3, the debt-death spiral. Eliminate all debt within 3 years. Debt kills retirement. Every payment is compounding, you lose forever. Rule 4, the side income. Earn additional income until you can save 40%. Pride kills retirement. Swallow your pride and work extra. Rule 5, the invisibility principle. Become socially invisible for 10 years. Your social life costs more than you can afford. Disappear now to be secure later. These are not complicated rules, but almost nobody follows them because they are not easy. They require you to live in a way that looks like failure to everyone around you. But looking poor for 10 years so you can be secure for 30 years is arithmetic, not failure. Here is your challenge. Calculate your current savings rate. If it is less than 40% and you are 55 with minimal retirement savings, you are not on track to retire. Do not lie to yourself. Do not make excuses. Do not tell yourself you will figure it out later. Start today, because every month you delay is a month of compounding you lose forever. I am 99 years old. I have maybe a year left, maybe less. I am telling you this because I won't be here much longer to tell you. And I don't want you to waste your life pretending you can retire when the arithmetic says you cannot. The formula is right here. Save 40% in index funds, eliminate debt, earn extra income, disappear socially for 10 years. That is it. Follow those rules and you will retire with dignity. Ignore them and you will work until your body fails, then become dependent on your children or the government. Your choice. Look at your bank account right now. Look at your retirement balance. Look at your age. If you are 55 with less than $200,000 saved, you are in emergency mode. The next 10 years will determine whether you retire or work until you die. There is no third option. The arithmetic does not allow it. You can live like you are, successful now and be broke later. Or you can live like you are broke now and be secure later. Those are your options. Most people choose to look successful now because they cannot accept the social shame of living below their means. That choice costs them everything. I am giving you the formula. The formula works, but it only works if you follow it completely. You cannot follow it 70% and expect it to work. It does not work that way. You follow it 100% or you fail. That is the truth. Now, if you want more brutal honesty about retirement and money, timeless principles that actually work instead of get-rich-quick garbage, subscribe to this channel. We don't promise easy. We don't promise fast. We promise truth. The truth is at 55, with nothing saved. You have 10 years to fix this. After that, the arithmetic says you're done. Use the time you have left. Do not waste it.